worship minorities because it's good for leftist PR, of course. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I was thinking about just how odd the complete and utter entitlement is that various people exhibit when they are either minorities or minorities in their field, when they express openly that being a minority means that they deserve our respect and admiration because, obviously, minority status as a woman in politics or something equates merit to every rational person.
You're naive, you're uneducated, blah, 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 blah. That is what I've been told, and that's what women have been told their whole lives whenever they want to do anything ambitious. So you know what? Screw it. They're going to say it, cause some trouble, get that 50%, get that parity, get that gender expanding representation in Congress, because you got to claim it. You got to take it. If we're going to wait for the 80% of dudes in Congress to give me permission, I'm going to be 80 by the time I get in there.
Obviously, she goes on quite a bit from there and actually does talk about some fairly typical talking points besides feminism, but absolutely doesn't say anything profound that you can't hear from any of the leftist blogs. I mean, it's like we have a Vox writer up there representing the new face of the Democratic Party, and all we can do is hope that she got paid at the internship that got her where she is now. Now, I don't have anything in particular against Cortez as an individual. I haven't even spent enough time really listening to her. Honestly, when I hear her speak, she seems like a young, bright enough to be bright, but not bright enough to be a serious threat to her opponents, opportunist that seems like she is exactly who the people in charge of her world is looking for at this very moment in order to help improve their image to their target audience. You see, the Democrats already tried staying in the center with the Hillary Clinton-style branding of the party, though failed miserably, so everybody told them that their only option was to move further left, and then once they got there, they realized that it was hella intersectional up in that house, and somebody told them that they needed to woke up and listen to young women of color. But why? Why, on a fundamental, subconscious level, does the left think that women and minorities must always be virtuous? Why exactly is that the default attitude of the diehard left? Why do they keep thinking that maybe this strategy works, even though we have tangible evidence from elections that these identity politics don't sell, not to mention the havoc they wreak in entertainment? Why do they keep trying? Well, mainly, like I already mentioned, I think it's entitlement a little bit, but that's coming after the fact, because it's coming from their voting base, as the Democrats basically raised an entire generation and a half of minorities and females to believe that they were owed something because they were minorities or females, and if the Democratic Party doesn't keep letting them believe that they will give them these entitlements that they think that they are owed by putting them on pedestals at every opportunity, they will lose interest in the party like everybody else already has. Dave Cullen from the channel Computing Forever refers to this cultural attitude as the tyranny of the minority, where people's ability to claim that they have been slighted by being born of a certain identity overrides meritocracy and forces people with actual talents and work ethic to bend the knee to those that can claim some form of oppression or another. Ultimately, we've all certainly witnessed this happen over and over, and I shouldn't be sitting here rehashing it all that much because I certainly wouldn't be the first. But what I think I can provide some insight into would be how and why this might have really happened, and how it affected the minds of people on a worldview shaping level. Yes, an entire paradigm shift happened in Western culture at the end of last decade, but every time that happens, most people don't realize it happened until it shifts again. You see, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I honestly feel as if Barack Obama was largely just an affirmative action hire as the President of the United States of America, which would sound a little bit racist if it weren't for the fact that I personally was one of the people who put him into office, as I voted for him twice. largely just because he was a black guy, and I figured it would be cool to have a black president. Sure, plenty of other people had plenty of other reasons to vote for Obama, mainly that he wasn't a Republican coming out of the Bush administration, where we went into the Middle East and started a war, basically never getting out of it, based on reasons nobody was entirely sure of, and largely still aren't. But overall, I honestly can't imagine that the fact that he was simply a Democrat was what ultimately got him the Democratic nomination. I think it was mostly that he was a black guy, and millions of people, myself included, never really thought that we'd live to see a black president. So we thought that it was cool, and it gave us hope to see him doing so well. Again, it wasn't only that, but it was probably what tipped it over the edge. Or easily, definitely. So, assuming that's the case, I want you to think about what his victory told everybody in the entire Western world, and more importantly, in our nation. A practical no-name ended up becoming the most powerful man on Earth, and we let him have that position basically with blind trust, largely just because we wanted to give our trust to people with his skin color. That was our collective values. We admitted that we saw his skin color as a virtue by itself, and that became substantiated in the collective unconscious as the attitude in America that mattered most. From there, the media ran with that notion for the rest of his presidency, as if they knew right after the polls had closed that people had largely voted for him for the sake of voting for a black guy that wasn't a Republican. The media obviously knew that his supporters and our citizens at large were pretty keen on not being racist. So they manipulated us by telling us that his critics were racists. Article after article and news commentator after news commentator painted a picture of the Obama presidency to be one of relentless racist abuse. But personally, I always saw the exact opposite in my social reality, and even when I started investigating right-wing media in 2015, everybody made it a point to say, we don't hate Obama because he's black. We hate his policies, and we always have. Still, these people were all painted as racist from the get-go, and that notion never went away. And then it escalated. Thus, when it got to Black Lives Matter and intersectional feminism, and all of those people telling everybody that white people needed to be allies to social justice, and that being an ally meant shut up and listen, well, it was clear what their intention was. And countless people took that and ran with it in their personal lives.
Safe space here for all. Stay quiet. For all women, you understand that? As your position as master, it is your job to create a place of comfort and home for the.
That clip was recorded in late 2015, and I believe that young woman was a freshman at the time. That means that she was about 11 years old when Obama entered into office, and her entire high school experience consisted of a collective unconscious of Americans surrounding her who believed that we lived in a nation where people elect individuals to be in charge of our nation based off of their immutable traits and not how they behave. Thus, of course she felt entitled to order around her professor in that way, as she was raised to do it. Not necessarily by her parents, not necessarily by her schooling before college, which I wouldn't find unlikely, but by the underlying feeling floating around her national zeitgeist that told her that it was her turn to order people around as a racial minority, as a woman, and whatever the hell else she was thinking. That all said, I also don't want people to get the impression that I am throwing stones without any acknowledgement of my personal position in relation to her. In fact, I used to have a bit of that entitled attitude regarding being gay, so I know exactly how it works. Basically, I went to a super far left hippie school in Seattle during the late 1990s where I was treated super well and as if I was stunning and brave for being an open homosexual. Even though I didn't really have anything to fear from my pot-smoking classmates, still, eventually, I got a bit spoiled, and I assumed I could cop an attitude with straight people, and they couldn't do anything about it because it was taboo to pick on me for being gay, or really, to pick on me at all, even if I kinda started it. It was a pretty overconfident way of approaching the world, though I'll admit that there was a bit more to it, as I did actually prove within my school that I had some rather formidable social skills. However, once I got to college in New York City and pulled the same type of attitude a few times on people that weren't having it, I realized I needed to grow up and act respectable in order to be respected. Did I always act respectable ever since then? Well, certainly not, and I probably often still don't. But at least I came to the realization eventually that in one environment, I was getting favors for being a minority, but those favors wouldn't last forever. And now, it seems, that maybe there's an entire generation of people who have that attitude who haven't learned that lesson yet. But I suspect that they eventually will.